Chapter 15. The Dog Vision. We stayed there near the mouth of the tongue until the end of the moon of making fat, June. Then the soldier chief told us that we could not be in that country because we had sold it and it was not ours anymore. We had not sold it, but the soldiers took all the rest of our horses from us and what guns we had and loaded us on a big fireboat that carried us down the Yellowstone and the Missouri to Fort Yates. There they unloaded us, and it was one of the new reservations they had made for the Lakota. Many of Sitting Bull's and Gall's people were there, but Gall and Sitting Bull were still in grandmother's land. The soldiers had taken the ponies away from all our people, and they said the Great Father in Washington would pay us for them, but he never did. But if he ever did, I have not heard of it. I learned that my own band, the Ogalallas, had been taken back to the country where we are now, and I decided that I ought to go there and perform my duty. So in the moon when the plums are scarlet, September, I started with 3 others. We had to go afoot, and we had only bows and arrows for weapons. The Brules had been taken to the place where they are now on Rosebud Creek while I was in grandmother's land, and we set out first for where they were, camping 7 times on the way. One evening we crossed Smoky Earth River, the White, and camped on the south side. We camped by a plum thicket, and the plums were ripe. That is all we had to eat. There was a bluff close by, and I went up there alone and sat down with my face to where the sun was setting. It was a clear evening with no wind, and it seemed that everything was listening hard to hear something. While I was looking over there, I felt that somebody wanted to talk to me. So I stood up and began to sing the first song of my vision, the one that the 2 spirits had sung to me. Behold, a sacred voice is calling you. All over the sky, a sacred voice is calling. While I was singing this song, suddenly the 2 men of my vision were coming again out of the sunset, head first like arrows slanting down. They were pointing at me with their bows. Then they stopped and stood, raising their bows above their heads and looking at me. They said nothing, but I could feel what they wanted. It was that I should do my duty among the Ogalallas with the power they had brought me in the vision. I stood there singing to them, and after a while they turned around and went back into the sunset, head first like arrows flying. When I went back to our little camp by the plum thicket, the others there, who knew of my power and had heard me on the bluff, asked what I had seen up there. I told them I was only singing to some people I knew in the outer world. I stayed only a little while among the Brules on Rosebud Creek, and then I came on alone to White Clay Creek, where the Wasichus were building Pine Ridge Agency for the Ogalallas. Our people called it the seat of Red Cloud, or the place where everything is disputed. There I stayed. And that winter, in the moon of popping trees, I was 18 years old. That was a very hard winter, and it was just like one long night, with me lying awake, waiting and waiting and waiting for daybreak. For now the thunder beings were like relatives to me, and they had gone away when the frost came and would not come back until the grasses showed their tender faces again. Without them I felt lost, and I was alone there among my people. Very few of them had seen the horse dance or knew anything about my vision and the power that it gave me. They seemed heavy and dark, and they could not know that they were heavy and dark. I could feel them like a great burden upon me. But when I would go all through my vision again, I loved the burden and felt pity for my people. And now when I look about me upon my people in despair, I feel like crying, and I wish my vision could have been given to a man more worthy. I wonder why it came to me, a pitiful old man who can do nothing. Men and women and children I have cured of sickness with the power the vision gave me, but my nation I could not help. If a man or woman or child dies, it does not matter long, for the nation lives on. It was the nation that was dying, and the vision was for the nation, but I have done nothing with it. When I was still young, I could feel the power all through me, and it seemed that with the whole outer world to help me, I could do anything. I had made a good start to fulfill my duty to the grandfathers, but I had much more to do. And so the winter was like a long night of waiting for the daybreak. When the grasses began to show their faces again, I was happy, for I could hear the thunder beings coming in the earth, and I could hear them saying, "It is time to do the work of your grandfathers." After the long winter of waiting, it was my first duty to go out lamenting. So after the first rainstorm, I began to get ready. When going out to lament, it is necessary to choose a wise old medicine man who is quiet and generous to help. He must fill and offer the pipe to the 6 powers and to the 4-leggeds and the wings of the air, and he must go along to watch. There was a good and wise old medicine man by the name of Few Tails who was glad to help me. First he told me to fast 4 days, and I could have only water during that time. Then, after he had offered the pipe, I had to purify myself in a sweat lodge, which we made with willow boughs set in the ground and bent down to make a round top. Over this we tied a bison robe. In the middle we put hot stones, and when I was in there, Few Tails poured water on the stones. I sang to the spirits while I was in there being purified. Then the old man rubbed me all over with the sacred sage. He then braided my hair, and I was naked except that I had a bison robe to wrap around me while lamenting in the night. For although the days were warm, the nights were cold yet. All I carried was the sacred pipe. It is necessary to go far away from people to lament, so Few Tails and I started from Pine Ridge toward where we are now. We came to a high hill close to Grass Creek, which is just a little way west from here. There was nobody there but the old man and myself and the sky and the earth, but the place was full of people, for the spirits were there. The sun was almost setting when we came to the hill, and the old man helped me make the place where I was to stand. We went to the highest point of the hill and made the ground there sacred by spreading sage upon it. Then Few Tails set a flowering stick in the middle of the place, and on the west, the north, the east, and the south sides of it he placed offerings of red willow bark tied into little bundles with scarlet cloth. Few Tails now told me what I was to do so that the spirits would hear me and make clear my next duty. I was to stand in the middle, crying and praying for understanding. Then I was to advance from the center to the quarter of the west and mourn there a while. Then I was to back up to the center, and from there approach the quarter of the north, wailing and praying there, and so on all around the circle. This I had to do all night long. It was time for me to begin lamenting, so Few Tails went away somewhere and left me there all alone on the hill with the spirits and the dying light. Standing in the center of the sacred place and facing the sunset, I began to cry, and while crying I had to say, "O great spirit, accept my offerings, O make me understand." As I was crying and saying this, there soared a spotted eagle from the west and whistled shrill and sat upon a pine tree east of me. I walked backwards to the center, and from there approached the north, crying and saying, "O great spirit, accept my offerings and make me understand." Then a chicken hawk came hovering and stopped upon a bush towards the south. I walked backwards to the center once again, and from there approached the east, crying and asking the Great Spirit to help me understand. And there came a black swallow flying all around me, singing, and stopped upon a bush not far away. Walking backwards to the center, I advanced upon the south. Until now I had only been trying to weep, but now I really wept, and the tears ran down my face. For as I looked yonder towards the place whence come the life of things, the nation's hoop and the flowering tree, I thought of the days when my relatives, now dead, were living and young, and of Crazy Horse, who was our strength, and would never come back to help us any more. I cried very hard, and I thought it might be better if my crying would kill me. Then I could be in the outer world where nothing is ever in despair. And while I was crying, something was coming from the south. It looked like dust far off, but when it came closer, I saw it was a cloud of beautiful butterflies of all colors. They swarmed around me so thick that I could see nothing else. I walked backwards to the flowering stick again, and the spotted eagle on the pine tree spoke and said, "Behold these, they are your people. They are in great difficulty, and you shall help them." Then I could hear all the butterflies that were swarming over me, and they were all making a pitiful whimpering noise as they too were weeping. Then they all arose and flew back into the south. Now the chicken hawk spoke from its bush and said, "Behold, your grandfathers shall come forth, and you shall hear them." Hearing this, I lifted up my eyes, and there was a big storm coming from the west. It was the thunder-being nation, and I could hear the neighing of horses and the sending of great voices. It was very dark now, and all the roaring west was streaked fearfully with swift fire. And as I stood there looking, a vision broke out of the shouting blackness torn with fire, and I saw the two men who had come to me first in my great vision. They came head first like arrows slanting earthward from the long flight, and when they neared the ground I could see a dust rising there, and out of the dust the heads of dogs were peeping. Then suddenly I saw that the dust was the swarm of many-colored butterflies hovering all around and over the dogs. By now the two men were riding sorrel horses, streaked with black lightning, and they charged with bows and arrows down upon the dogs, while the thunder beings cheered for them with roaring voices. Then suddenly the butterflies changed and were storm-driven swallows, swooping and whirling in a great cloud behind the charging riders. The first of these now plunged upon a dog's head and arose with it hanging bloody on his arrow point, while the whole west roared with cheering. The second did the same, and the black west flashed and cheered again. Then as the two arose together, I saw that the dogs' heads had changed to the heads of Wasichus, and as I saw, the vision went out, and the storm was close upon me, terrible to see, and roaring. I cried harder than ever now, for I was much afraid. The night was black about me, and terrible with swift fire, and the sending of great voices, and the roaring of the hail. And as I cried, I begged the grandfathers to pity me and spare me, and told them that I knew now what they wanted me to do on earth, and I would do it if I could. All at once I was not afraid any more, and I thought that if I was killed, probably I might be better off in the other world. So I lay down there in the center of the sacred place and offered the pipe again. Then I drew the bison robe over me and waited. All around me growled and roared the voices, and the hail was like the drums of many giants, beating while the giants sang, "Hey, ah, hey." No hail fell there in the sacred circle where I lay, nor any rain. And when the storm was past, I raised my robe and listened, and in the stillness I could hear the rain floods singing in the gulches all around me in the darkness, and far away to eastward there were dying voices calling, "Hey, ah, hey." The night was old by now, and soon I fell asleep. And as I slept, I saw my people sitting sad and troubled all round a sacred tepee, and there were many who were sick. And as I looked on them and wept, a strange light leaped upward from the ground close by, a light of many colors, sparkling with rays that touched the heavens. Then it was gone, and in the place from whence it sprang a herb was growing, and I saw the leaves it had. And as I was looking at the herb, so that I might not forget it, there was a voice that woke me, and it said, "Make haste, your people need you." I looked and saw the east was just beginning to turn white. Standing up, I faced the young light and began to mourn again and pray. Then the daybreak star came slowly, very beautiful and still, and all around it there were clouds of baby faces smiling at me, the faces of the people not yet born. The stars about them now were beautiful with many colors, and beneath these there were heads of men and women moving around, and birds were singing somewhere yonder, and there were horses nickering and blowing as they do when they are happy, and somewhere deer were whistling, and there were bison mooing too. What I could not see of this, I heard. I think I fell asleep again, for after a while I was startled by a voice that said, "Get up, I have come after you." I looked to see a spirit, but it was the good old man Few Tails standing over me, and now the sun was rising. So we brought the sacred pipe back home, and I went into the sweat lodge after offering the pipe to the 6 powers. When I was purified again, some very old men who were good and wise asked me to tell them what I had heard and seen. So after offering and smoking the sacred pipe again, I told it all to them, and they said that I must perform the dog vision on earth to help the people. And because the people were discouraged and sad, I should do this with heyokas, who are sacred fools, doing everything wrong or backwards to make the people laugh. They said they did not know but I would be a great man, because not many men were called to see such visions. I must wait 20 days, they said, and then perform my duty. So I waited. Chapter 16. Heyoka Ceremony. 20 days passed, and it was time to perform the dog vision with heyokas. But before I tell you how we did it, I will say something about heyokas and the heyoka ceremony, which seems to be very foolish, but is not so. Only those who have had visions of the thunder beings of the West can act as heyokas. They have sacred power, and they share some of this with all the people, but they do it through funny actions. When a vision comes from the thunder beings of the West, it comes with terror like a thunderstorm. But when the storm of vision has passed, the world is greener and happier, for wherever the truth of vision comes upon the world, it is like a rain. The world, you see, is happier after the terror of the storm. But in the heyoka ceremony, everything is backwards, and it is planned that the people shall be made to feel jolly and happy first, so that it may be easier for the power to come to them. You have noticed that the truth comes into this world with 2 faces. One is sad with suffering, and the other laughs. But it is the same face, laughing or weeping. When people are already in despair, maybe the laughing face is better for them. And when they feel too good and are too sure of being safe, maybe the weeping face is better for them to see. And so I think that is what the heyoka ceremony is for. There is a man by the name of Wachpane, poor, who took charge of this ceremony for me, because he had acted as a heyoka many times and knew all about it. First he told all the people to gather in a circle on the flat near Pine Ridge, and in the center, near a sacred teepee that was set there, he placed a pot of water which was made to boil by dropping hot stones from a fire into it. First, he had to make an offering of sweetgrass to the west. He sat beside the fire with some sweetgrass in his hand and said, "To the Great Spirit's day, to that day grown old and wise, I will make an offering." Then, as he sprinkled the grass upon the fire and the sweet smoke arose, he sang, "This I burn as an offering, behold it, a sacred praise I am making, a sacred praise I am making. My nation, behold it in kindness. The day of the sun has been my strength, the path of the moon shall be my robe. A sacred praise I am making, a sacred praise I am making." Then the dog had to be killed quickly and without making any scar, as lightning kills, for it is the power of the lightning that heyokas have. Over the smoke of the sweet grass a rawhide rope was held to make it sacred. Then 2 heyokas tied a slip noose in the rope and put this over the neck of the dog. 3 times they pulled the rope gently, 1 at each end of the rope, and the 4th time they jerked it hard, breaking the neck. Then Wachpane singed the dog and washed it well, and after that he cut away everything but the head, the spine, and the tail. Now walking 6 steps away from the pot, 1 for each of the powers, he turned to the west, offering the head and spine to the thunder beings, then to the north, the east, and the south, then to the spirit above and to Mother Earth. After this, standing where he was, 6 steps away, he faced the pot and said, "In a sacred manner I thus boil this dog." 3 times he swung it, and the 4th time he threw it so that it fell head first into the boiling water. Then he took the heart of the dog and did with it just what he had done with the head and spine. During all this time, 30 heyokas, 1 for each day of a moon, were doing foolish tricks among the people to make them feel jolly. They were all dressed and painted in such funny ways that everybody who saw them had to laugh. One side and I were fellow clowns. We had our bodies painted red all over and streaked with black lightning. The right sides of our heads were shaved, and the hair on the left side was left hanging long. This looked very funny, but it had a meaning, for when we looked toward where you are always facing, the south, the bare sides of our heads were toward the west, which showed that we were humble before the thunder beings who had given us power. Each of us carried a very long bow, so long that nobody could use it, and it was very crooked too. The arrows that we carried were very long and very crooked, so that it looked crazy to have them. We were riding sorrels with streaks of black lightning all over them, for we were to represent the two men of my dog vision. Wachapane now went into the sacred teepee where he sang about the Heokas. These are sacred, these are sacred, they have said, these are sacred, they have said. 12 times he sang this, once for each of the moons. Afterward, while the pot was boiling, one side and I, sitting on our painted sorrels, faced the west and sang, in a sacred manner they have sent voices. Half the universe has sent voices. In a sacred manner they have sent voices to you. Even while we were singing thus, the Heokas were doing foolish things and making laughter. For instance, 2 Heokas with long crooked bows and arrows painted in a funny way would come to a little shallow puddle of water. They would act as though they thought it was a wide, deep river that they had to cross. So, making motions but saying nothing, they would decide to see how deep the river was. Taking their long, crooked arrows, they would thrust these into the water, not downwards, but flatwise, just under the surface. This would make the whole arrow wet. Standing the arrows up beside them, they would show that the water was far over their heads in depth, so they would get ready to swim. One would then plunge into the shallow puddle head first, getting his face in the mud and fighting the water wildly as though he were drowning. Then the other one would plunge in to save his comrade, and there would be more funny antics in the water to make the people laugh. After one side and I had sung to the west, we faced the pot, where the heart and the head of the dog had been boiling. With sharp pointed arrows we charged on horseback upon the pot and past it. I had to catch the head upon my arrow, and one side had to catch the heart, for we were representing the 2 men I had seen in the vision. After we had done this, the Heokas all chased us, trying to get a piece of the meat, and the people rushed to the pot, trying to get a piece of the sacred flesh. Ever so little of it would be good for them, for the power of the West was in it now. It was like giving them medicine to make them happier and stronger. When the ceremony was over, everybody felt a great deal better, for it had been a day of fun. They were better able now to see the greenness of the world, the wideness of the sacred day, the colors of the earth, and to set these in their minds. The 6 grandfathers have placed in this world many things, all of which should be happy. Every little thing is sent for something, and in that thing there should be happiness and the power to make happy. Like the grasses showing tender faces to each other, thus we should do, for this was the wish of the grandfathers of the world. Chapter 17. The First Cure. After the Heoka ceremony, I came to live here where I am now between Wounded Knee Creek and Grass Creek. Others came too, and we made these little gray houses of logs that you see, and they are square. It is a bad way to live, for there can be no power in a square. You have noticed that everything an Indian does is in a circle, and that is because the power of the world always works in circles, and everything tries to be round. In the old days, when we were a strong and happy people, all our power came to us from the sacred hoop of the nation, and so long as the hoop was unbroken, the people flourished. The flowering tree was the living center of the hoop, and the circle of the 4 quarters nourished it. The east gave peace and light, the south gave warmth, the west gave rain, and the north with its cold and mighty wind gave strength and endurance. This knowledge came to us from the outer world with our religion. Everything the power of the world does is done in a circle. The sky is round, and I have heard that the earth is round like a ball, and so are all the stars. The wind in its greatest power whirls. Birds make their nests in circles, for theirs is the same religion as ours. The sun comes forth and goes down again in a circle. The moon does the same, and both are round. Even the seasons form a great circle in their changing, and always come back again to where they were. The life of a man is a circle from childhood to childhood, and so it is in everything where power moves. Our teepees were round like the nests of birds, and these were always set in a circle. The nations hoop, a nest of many nests, where the Great Spirit meant for us to hatch our children. But the Wasichus have put us in these square boxes. Our power is gone and we are dying, for the power is not in us anymore. You can look at our boys and see how it is with us. When we were living by the power of the circle in the way we should, boys were men at 12 or 13 years ago, but now it takes them very much longer to mature. Well, it is as it is. We are prisoners of war while we are waiting here, but there is another world. It was in the moon of shedding ponies, May, when we had the Heyoka ceremony. One day in the moon of fatness, June, when everything was blooming, I invited one side to come over and eat with me. I had been thinking about the 4-rayed herb that I had now seen twice. The first time in the great vision when I was 9 years old, and the second time when I was lamenting on the hill. I knew that I must have this herb for curing, and I thought I could recognize the place where I had seen it growing that night when I lamented. After one side and I had eaten, I told him there was a herb I must find, and I wanted him to help me hunt for it. Of course I did not tell him I had seen it in a vision. He was willing to help, so we got on our horses and rode over to Grass Creek. Nobody was living over there. We came to the top of a high hill above the creek, and there we got off our horses and sat down, for I felt that we were close to where I saw the herb growing in my vision of the dog. We sat there a while singing together some Heyoka songs. Then I began to sing alone in a song I had heard in my first great vision. In a sacred manner they are sending voices. After I had sung this song, I looked down towards the west, and yonder at a certain spot beside the creek were crows and magpies, chicken hawks and spotted eagles circling around and around. Then I knew, and I said to one side, "Friend, right here is where the herb is growing." He said, "We will go forth and see." So we got on our horses and rode down Grass Creek until we came to a dry gulch, and this we followed up. As we neared the spot, the birds all flew away, and it was a place where 4 or 5 dry gulches came together. There, right on the side of the bank, the herb was growing, and I knew it, although I had never seen one like it before, except in my vision. It had a root about as long as my elbow, and this was a little thicker than my thumb. It was flowering in 4 colors, blue, white, red, and yellow. We got off our horses, and after I had offered red willow bark to the 6 powers, I made a prayer to the herb and said to it, "Now we shall go forth to the 2-leggeds, but only to the weakest ones, and there shall be happy days among the weak." It was easy to dig the herb, because it was growing in the edge of the clay gulch. Then we started back with it. When we came to Grass Creek again, we wrapped it in some good sage that was growing there. Something must have told me to find the herb just then, for the next evening I needed it and could have done nothing without it. I was eating supper when a man by the name of Cuts to Pieces came in, and he was saying, "Hey, hey, hey," for he was in trouble. I asked him what was the matter, and he said, "I have a boy of mine, and he is very sick, and I am afraid he will die soon. He has been sick a long time. They say you have great power from the horse dance and the Heyoka ceremony, so maybe you can save him for me. I think so much of him." I told Cuts to Pieces that if he really wanted to help, he should go home and bring me back a pipe with an eagle feather on it. While he was gone, I thought about what I had to do, and I was afraid, because I had never cured anybody yet with my power, and I was very sorry for Cuts to Pieces. I prayed hard for help. When Cuts to Pieces came back with the pipe, I told him to take it around to the left of me, leave it there, and pass out again to the right of me. When he had done this, I sent for one side to come and help me. Then I took the pipe and went to where the sick little boy was. My father and my mother went with us, and my friend, Standing Bear, was already there. I first offered the pipe to the 6 powers, then I passed it, and we all smoked. After that I began making a rumbling thunder sound on the drum. You know, when the power of the West comes to the 2-leggeds, it comes with rumbling, and when it has passed, everything lifts up its head and is glad, and there is greenness. So I made this rumbling sound. Also, the voice of the drum is an offering to the spirit of the world. Its sound arouses the mind and makes men feel the mystery and power of things. The sick little boy was on the northeast side of the teepee, and when we entered at the south, we went around from left to right, stopping on the west side when we had made the circle. You want to know why we always go from left to right like that? I can tell you something of the reason, but not all. Think of this. Is not the south the source of life, and does not the flowering stick truly come from there? And does not man advance from there toward the setting sun of his life? Then does not he approach the colder north where the white hairs are? And does he not then arrive, if he lives, at the source of light and understanding, which is the east? Then does he not return to where he began, to his second childhood, there to give back his life to all life, and his flesh to the earth whence it came? The more you think about this, the more meaning you will see in it. As I said, we went into the teepee from left to right, and sat ourselves down on the west side. The sick little boy was on the northeast side, and he looked as though he were only skin and bones. I had the pipe, the drum, and the 4-rayed herb all ready, so I asked for a wooden cup, full of water, and an eagle bone whistle, which was for the spotted eagle of my great vision. They placed the cup of water in front of me, and then I had to think a while, because I had never done this before and I was in doubt. I understood a little more now, so I gave the eagle bone whistle to one side and told him now to use it in helping me. Then I filled the pipe with a red willow bark and gave it to the pretty young daughter of Cuts to Pieces, telling her to hold it, just as I had seen the Virgin of the East holding it in my great vision. Everything was ready now, so I made low thunder on the drum, keeping time as I sent forth a voice. 4 times I cried, "Hey-ya, hey," drumming as I cried to the spirit of the world. And while I was doing this, I could feel the power coming through me from my feet up, and I knew that I could help the sick little boy. I kept on sending a voice, while I made low thunder on the drum, saying, "My grandfather, Great Spirit, you are the only one, and to no other can anyone send voices. You have made everything, they say, and you have made it good and beautiful. The 4 quarters and the 2 roads crossing each other you have made. Also you have set a power where the sun goes down. The 2-leggeds on earth are in despair. For them, my grandfather, I send a voice to you. You have said this to me, the weak shall walk. In vision you have taken me to the center of the world, and there you have shown me the power to make over. The water in the cup that you have given me, by its power shall the dying live. The herb that you have shown me, through its power shall the feeble walk upright. From where we are always facing, the south, behold, a virgin shall appear, walking the good red road, offering the pipe as she walks, and hers also is the power of the flowering tree. From where the giant lives, the north, you have given me a sacred cleansing wind, and where this wind passes, the weak shall have strength. You have said this to me, to you and all your powers, and to Mother Earth I send a voice for help. You see, I had never done this before, and I know now that only one power would have been enough, but I was so eager to help the sick little boy that I called on every power there is. I had been facing the west, of course, while sending a voice. Now I walked to the north and to the east and to the south, stopping there where the source of all life is and where the good red road begins. Standing there, I sang thus, "In a sacred manner I have made them walk. A sacred nation lies low. In a sacred manner I have made them walk. A sacred 2-legged he lies low. In a sacred manner he shall walk." While I was singing this, I could feel something queer all through my body, something that made me want to cry for all unhappy things, and there were tears on my face. Now I walked to the quarter of the west, where I lit the pipe, offered it to the powers, and, after I had taken a whiff of smoke, I passed it around. When I looked at the sick little boy again, he smiled at me, and I could feel that the power was getting stronger. I next took the cup of water, drank a little of it, and went around to where the sick little boy was. Standing before him, I stamped the earth 4 times. Then, putting my mouth to the pit of his stomach, I drew through him the cleansing wind of the north. I next chewed some of the herb and put it in the water, afterward blowing some of it on the boy and to the 4 quarters. The cup with the rest of the water I gave to the Virgin, who gave it to the sick little boy to drink. Then I told the Virgin to help the boy stand up and to walk around the circle with him, beginning at the south, the source of life. He was very poor and weak, but with the Virgin's help he did this. Then I went away. Next day, Cuts to Pieces came and told me that his little boy was feeling better and was sitting up and could eat something again. In 4 days he could walk around. He got well and lived to be 30 years old. Cuts to Pieces gave me a good horse for doing this, but of course I would have done it for nothing. When the people heard about how the little boy was cured, many came to me for help, and I was busy most of the time. This was in the summer of my 19th year, 1882, in the moon of making fat. Chapter 18. The Powers of the Bison and the Elk. I think I have told you, but if I have not, you must have understood, that a man who has a vision is not able to use the power of it until after he has performed the vision on earth for the people to see. You remember that my great vision came to me when I was only 9 years old, and you have seen that I was not much good for anything until after I had performed the horse dance near the mouth of the Tongue River during my 18th summer. And if the great fear had not come upon me, as it did, and forced me to do my duty, I must have been less good to the people than some man who had never dreamed at all, even with the memory of so great a vision in me. But the fear came, and if I had not obeyed it, I am sure it would have killed me in a little while. It was even then only after the Heyoka ceremony, in which I performed my dog vision, that I had the power to practice as a medicine man, curing sick people, and many I cured with the power that came through me. Of course it was not I who cured, it was the power from the outer world, and the visions and ceremonies had only made me like a hole through which the power could come to the 2-leggeds. If I thought that I was doing it myself, the hole would close up and no power could come through. Then everything I could do would be foolish. There were other parts of my great vision that I still had to perform before I could use the power that was in those parts. If you think about my great vision again, you will remember how the red man turned into a bison and rolled, and that the people found the good red road after that. If you will read again what is written, you will see how it was. To use the power of the bison, I had to perform that part of my vision for the people to see. It was during the summer of my first cure that this was done. I carried the pipe to Fox Belly, a wise and good old medicine man, and asked him to help me do this duty. He was glad to help me, but first I had to tell him how it was in that part of my vision. I did not tell him all my vision, only that part. I had never told anyone all of it, and even until now nobody ever heard it all. Even my old friend, Standing Bear, and my son here have heard it now for the first time when I have told it to you. Of course there was very much in the vision that even I cannot tell when I try hard, because very much of it was not for words, but I have told what can be told. It has made me very sad to do this at last, and I have lain awake at night worrying and wondering if I was doing right, for I know I have given away my power when I have given away my vision, and maybe I cannot live very long now. But I think I have done right to save the vision in this way, even though I may die sooner because I did it, for I know the meaning of the vision is wise and beautiful and good, and you can see that I am only a pitiful old man after all. Well, I told Foxbelly all that he needed to know that he might help me. And when he had heard even so little, he said, "My boy, you had a great vision, and I can see that it is your duty to help the people walk the red road in a manner pleasing to the powers. This ceremony was not a long one, but it had great meaning, because it made a picture of the relation between the people and the bison, and the power was in the meaning. First, we made a sacred place like a bison wallow at the center of the nation's hoop, and there we set up the sacred teepee. Inside this, we made the circle of the 4 quarters. Across the circle from south to north, we painted a red road, and Foxbelly made little bison tracks all along on both sides of it, meaning that the people should walk there with the power and endurance of the bison, facing the great white cleansing wind of the world. Also, he placed at the north end of the road the cup of water, which is the gift of the West, so that the people, while leaning against the great wind with the endurance of bison, would be going toward the water of life. I was painted red all over like the man of my vision before he turned into a bison. I wore bison horns, and on the left horn hung a piece of the daybreak star herb, which bears the 4-rayed flower of understanding. On the left side of my body I wore a single eagle feather, which was for my people, hanging on the side of the bison and feeding there. One side had come over to help me in this ceremony too. He was painted red all over, and he carried the drum and the pipe, and wherever I went he followed, as the people followed the bison. We stood inside the teepee at the south end of the good red road, and Foxbelly sang like this: "Revealing this, they walk, a sacred herb, revealing it, they walk. Revealing this, they walk, the sacred life of bison, revealing it, they walk. Revealing this, they walk, a sacred eagle feather, revealing it, they walk. Revealing them, they walk, the eagle and the bison, like relatives, they walk." Then after we had walked the red road, one side and I went out of the teepee, and the people flocked around us, and the sick came with scarlet offerings to be cured. We went all around among the people, acting like bison and making the sounds they make. Then we returned to the teepee, and there the people brought their little children to us, and to each I gave a little of the water of life from the wooden cup, that their feet might know the good red road that leads to health and happiness. It is from understanding that power comes, and the power in the ceremony was in understanding what it meant, for nothing can live well except in a manner that is suited to the way the sacred power of the world lives and moves. After this, I went on curing sick people, and I was busy doing this. I was in doubt no longer. I felt like a man, and I could feel the power with me all the time. It was during the next summer, when I was in my 20th year, 1883, that I performed the elk ceremony, as a duty to that part of my great vision. You will remember how the pipe and the bison were in the east and the elk in the south. This ceremony of the elk was to represent the source of life and the mystery of growing. I sent a pipe to Running Elk, who was Standing Bear's uncle and a good and wise old man. He came and was willing to help me. We set up a sacred teepee at the center as before. I had to use 6 elks and 4 virgins. The elks are of the south, but the power that they represented in my vision is nourished by the 4 quarters and from the sky and the earth, so there were 6 of them. The 4 virgins represented the life of the nation's hoop, which has 4 quarters, so there were 4 virgins. Running Elk chose 2 of the elks, and I, who stood between the power of the world and the nation's hoop, chose the 4 others, for my duty was to the life of the hoop on earth. The 6 elk men wore complete elk hides on their backs and over their heads. Their limbs were painted black from the knee and elbow down, and yellow from there up, for the growing power is rooted in mystery like the night, and reaches lightward. Seeds sprout in the darkness of the ground before they know the summer and the day. In the night of the womb the spirit quickens into flesh. The 4 virgins wore scarlet dresses, and each had a single eagle feather in her braided hair, for out of the woman the people grows, and the eagle feather again was for the people as in the bison ceremony. The faces of the virgins were painted yellow, the color of the south, the source of life. One had a daybreak star in red upon her forehead. One had a crescent moon in blue, for the power of woman grows with the moon and comes and goes with it. One had the sun upon her forehead, and around the mouth and eyebrows of the 4th a big blue circle was painted to mean the nation's hoop. On the back of each of the elk men was painted the nation's hoop, for upon the backs of men the nation is carried, and in the center of each hoop hung a single eagle feather for the people. They had yellow masks upon their faces, for behind the woman's power of life is hidden the power of man. They all carried flowering sticks cut from the sacred wrestling tree, the cottonwood, with leaves left at the top, and the sticks were painted red. The woman is the life of the flowering tree, but the man must feed and care for it. One of the virgins also carried the flowering stick, another carried the pipe, which gives peace. A third bore the herb of healing, and the fourth held the sacred hoop, for all these powers together are women's power. Of course, before any of this was done, those who were to take part were purified in the sweat lodge as always. We were all inside the sacred teepee, and Running Elk sang this song. Advancing to the quarters, they are coming to behold you. Advancing to the quarters, they are coming to behold you. Then the elk men all made the elk sound. Un, un, un. Running Elk then sang again. Singing, I send a voice as I walk. Singing, I send a voice as I walk. A sacred hoop I wear as I walk. It was time now to come out of the sacred teepee. First came the virgin with the pipe, next she who bore the flowering stick, then the one who held the herb, and last the bearer of the nation's hoop. The 4 virgins stood abreast, facing the west. Then we 6 elk men came out, snorting and stamping our feet. We stopped abreast, behind the virgins, who now held up the sacred things they carried, offering them to the thunder beings. When they had done this, they walked abreast to the north, while we elk men danced around them in a circle, and there they offered their sacred objects to the great white cleansing wind. In the same way we went to the east and to the south, the virgins making the offering at each place, and we elk men dancing around them in a circle all the while. From the south, the 4 virgins turned straight north, following the good red road to the center of the village where the sacred teepee stood, and we elk men followed, dancing around them, for the power of the man encircles and protects the power of the woman. The 4 maidens entered the teepee, first she with the sacred hoop, then she who bore the flowering stick, next the one who held the cleansing herb, and after her the bearer of the pipe. When they had all entered, we elk men followed into the teepee. This was the ceremony, and as I said before, the power of it was in the understanding of its meaning, for nothing can live well except in a manner suited to the way the power of the world lives and moves to do its work. Chapter 19. Across the Big Water. As I told you, it was in the summer of my 20th year, 1883, that I performed the ceremony of the elk. That fall, they say, the last of the bison herds was slaughtered by the Wasichus. I can remember when the bison were so many that they could not be counted. But more and more Wasichus came to kill them until there were only heaps of bones scattered where there used to be. The Wasichus did not kill them to eat. They killed them for the metal that makes them crazy, and they took only the hides to sell. Sometimes they did not even take the hides, only the tongues. And I have heard that fireboats came down the Missouri River loaded with dried bison tongues. You can see that the men who did this were crazy. Sometimes they did not even take the tongues. They just killed and killed because they liked to do that. When we hunted bison, we killed only what we needed, and when there was nothing left but heaps of bones, the Wasichus came and gathered up even the bones and sold them. All our people now were settling down in square gray houses, scattered here and there across this hungry land, and around them the Wasichus had drawn a line to keep them in. The nation's hoop was broken, and there was no center any longer for the flowering tree. The people were in despair. They seemed heavy to me, heavy and dark, so heavy that it seemed they could not be lifted, so dark that they could not be made to see any more. Hunger was among us often now, for much of what the Great Father in Washington sent us must have been stolen by Wasichus who were crazy to get money. There were many lies, but we could not eat them. The forked tongue made promises. I kept on curing the sick for 3 years more, and many came to me and were made over. But when I thought of my great vision, which was to save the nation's hoop and make the holy tree to bloom in the center of it, I felt like crying. For the sacred hoop was broken and scattered. The life of the people was in the hoop, and what are many little lives if the life of those lives will be gone? But in my 23rd summer, 1886, it seemed that there was a little hope. There came to us some Wasichus who wanted a band of Ogalalas for a big show that the other Pahuska had. They told us this show would go across the big water to strange lands, and I thought I ought to go, because I might learn some secret of the Wasichu that would help my people somehow. In my great vision, when I stood at the center of the world, the two men from the east had brought me the daybreak star herb, and they had told me to drop it on the earth, and where it touched the ground it took root and bloomed forayed. It was the herb of understanding. Also, where the red man of my vision changed into a bison that rolled, the same herb grew and bloomed when the bison had vanished, and after that the people in my vision found the good red road again. Maybe if I could see the great world of the Wasichu, I could understand how to bring the sacred hoop together and make the tree bloom again at the center of it. I looked back on the past and recalled my people's old ways, but they were not living that way anymore. They were traveling the black road, everybody for himself and with little rules of his own, as in my vision. I was in despair, and I even thought that if the Wasichus had a better way, then maybe my people should live that way. I know now that this was foolish, but I was young and in despair. My relatives told me I should stay at home and go on curing people, but I would not listen to them. The show people sent wagons from Rushville on the iron road to get us, and we were about 100 men and women. Many of our people followed us halfway to the iron road, and there we camped and ate together. Afterward, we left our people crying there, for we were going very far across the big water. That evening, where the big wagons were waiting for us on the iron road, we had a dance. Then we got into the wagons. When we started, it was dark, and thinking of my home and my people made me very sad. I wanted to get off and run back, but we went roaring all night long, and in the morning we ate at Long Pine. Then we started again and went roaring all day and came to a very big town in the evening. Then we roared along all night again and came to a much bigger town. There we stayed all day and all night, and right there I could compare my people's ways with Wasichu ways, and this made me sadder than before. I wished and wished that I had not gone away from home. Then we went roaring on again, and after a while we came to a still bigger town, a very big town. We walked through this town to the place where the show was. Some Pawnees and Omahas were there, and when they saw us, they made war cries and charged, cooping us. They were doing this for fun and because they felt glad to see us. I was surprised at the big houses and so many people, and there were bright lights at night, so you could not see the stars, and some of these lights, I heard, were made with the power of thunder. We stayed there and made shows for many, many Wasichus all that winter. I liked the part of the show we made, but not the part the Wasichus made. After a while I got used to being there, but I was like a man who had never had a vision. I felt dead and my people seemed lost, and I thought I might never find them again. I did not see anything to help my people. I could see that the Wasichus did not care for each other the way our people did before the nation's hoop was broken. They would take everything from each other if they could, and so there were some who had more of everything than they could use, while crowds of people had nothing at all and maybe were starving. They had forgotten that the earth was their mother. This could not be better than the old ways of my people. There was a prisoner's house on an island where the big water came up to the town, and we saw that one day. Men pointed guns at the prisoners and made them move around like animals in a cage. This made me feel very sad, because my people too were penned up in islands, and maybe that was the way the Wasichus were going to treat them. In the spring it got warmer, but the Wasichus had even the grass penned up. We heard then that we were going to cross the big water to strange lands. Some of our people went home and wanted me to go with them, but I had not seen anything good for my people yet. Maybe across the big water there was something to see, so I did not go home, although I was sick and in despair. They put us all on a very big fireboat, so big that when I first saw I could hardly believe it, and when it sent forth a voice I was frightened. There were other big fireboats sending voices, and little ones too. After a while I could see nothing but water, 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 and we did not seem to be going anywhere, just up and down, but we were told that we were going fast. If we were, I thought that we must drop off where the water ended, or maybe we might have to stop where the sky came down to the water. There was nothing but mist where the big town used to be, and nothing but water all around. We were all in despair now, and many were feeling so sick that they began to sing their death songs. When evening came, a big wind was roaring and the water thundered. We had things that were meant to be hung up while we slept in them. This I learned afterward. We did not know what to do with these, so we spread them out on the floor and lay down on them. The floor tipped in every direction, and this got worse and worse, so that we rolled from one side to the other and could not sleep. We were frightened, and now we are all very sick too. At first the Wasichus laughed at us, but very soon we could see that they were frightened too, because they were running around and were very much excited. Our women were crying, and even some of the men cried, because it was terrible and they could do nothing. After a while the Wasichus came and gave us things to tie around so that we could float. I did not put on the one they gave me. I did not want to float. Instead, I dressed for death, putting on my best clothes that I wore in the show, and then I sang my death song. Others dressed for death too and sang, because if it was the end of our lives and we could do nothing, we wanted to die brave. We could not fight this that was going to kill us, but we could die so that our spirit relatives would not be ashamed of us. Everything we had eaten came right up, and then it kept on trying to come up when there was nothing there. We did not sleep at all, and in the morning the water looked like mountains, but the wind was not so strong. Some of the bison and elk that we had with us for the show died that day, and the Wasichus threw them in the water. When I saw the poor bison thrown over, I felt like crying, because I thought right there they were throwing part of the power of my people away. After we had been on the fireboat a long while, we could see many houses and then many other fireboats tied close together along the bank. We thought now we could get off very soon, but we could not. There was a little fireboat that had come through the gate of waters, and it stopped beside us, and the people on it looked at everything on our fireboat before we could get off. We went very slowly nearly all day, I think, and after a while we came to where there were many, many houses close together, and more fireboats than could be counted. These houses were different from what we had seen before. The Wasichus kept us on the fireboat all night, and then they unloaded us, and took us to a place where the show was going to be. The name of this very big town was London. We were on land now, but we still felt dizzy as though we were still on water. And at first it was hard to walk. We stayed in this place 6 moons, and many, many people came to see the show. One day we were told that Majesty was coming. I did not know what that was at first, but I learned afterward. It was Grandmother England, Queen Victoria, who owned Grandmother's land where we lived a while after the Wasichus murdered Crazy Horse. She came to the show in a big shining wagon, and there were soldiers on both sides of her, and many other shining wagons came too. That day other people could not come to the show, just Grandmother England and some people who came with her. Sometimes we had to shoot in the show, but this time we did not shoot at all. We danced and sang, and I was one of the dancers chosen to do this for the grandmother, because I was young and limber then, and could dance many ways. We stood right in front of Grandmother England. She was little but fat, and we liked her, because she was good to us. After we had danced, she spoke to us. She said something like this: "I am 67 years old. All over the world I have seen all kinds of people, but today I have seen the best-looking people I know. If you belonged to me, I would not let them take you around in a show like this." She said other good things too, and then she said we must come to see her, because she had come to see us. She shook hands with all of us. Her hand was very little and soft. We gave a big cheer for her, and then the shining wagons came in, and she got into one of them, and they all went away. In about a half moon after that, we went to see the grandmother. They put us in some of those shining wagons and took us to a very beautiful place where there was a very big house with sharp pointed towers on it. There were many seats built high in a circle, and these were just full of Wasichus who were all pounding their heels and yelling, "Jubilee, Jubilee, Jubilee." I never heard what this meant. They put us together in a certain place at the bottom of the seats. First there appeared a beautiful black wagon with 2 black horses, and it went all around the show place. I heard that the grandmother's grandson, a little boy, was in that wagon. Next came a beautiful black wagon with 4 gray horses. On each of the 2 right-hand horses there was a rider, and a man walked, holding the front left-hand horse. I heard that some of grandmother's relatives were in this wagon. Next came 8 buckskin horses, 2 by 2, pulling a shining black wagon. There was a rider on each right-hand horse, and a man walked, holding the front left-hand horse. There were soldiers with bayonets facing outward all round this wagon. Now all the people in the seats were roaring and yelling Jubilee and Victoria. Then we saw Grandmother England again. She was sitting in the back of the wagon, and 2 women sat in the front, facing her. Her dress was all shining, and her hat was all shining, and her wagon was all shining, and so were the horses. She looked like a fire coming. Afterward, I heard that there was yellow and white metal all over the horses and the wagon. When she came to where we were, her wagon stopped and she stood up. Then all those people stood up and roared and bowed to her. But she bowed to us. We sent up a great cry, and our women made the tremolo. The people in the crowd were so excited that we heard some of them got sick and fell over. Then, when it was quiet, we sang a song to the grandmother. That was a very happy time. We liked Grandmother England because we could see that she was a fine woman, and she was good to us. Maybe if she had been our grandmother, it would have been better for our people. Chapter 20. The Spirit Journey. Yes, that was a happy time, but it was all over. We went to Manchester and had a show there for several moons. When the show was going to leave very early next morning, 3 other young men and myself got lost in Manchester, and the fireboat went away without us. We could not talk the Wasichu language, and we did not know what to do, so we just roamed around. After a while, we found 2 other Lakotas who had been left behind, and one of these could talk English. He said if we went to London, we could get money in another show that was there, and then we could go home. We were all sick to go home, so the English talker got some tickets with the money we all had together, and we went to London on the Iron Road. The show was called Mexican Joe. It was a small show, but they gave us $1 every day for being in it. After we had been in London a while, Mexican Joe took us to Paris, and we had a show there a long while. There was a Wasichu girl who came to the show very often. She liked me and took me home to see her father and mother. They liked me too and were good to me. I could not talk their language. I made signs, and the girl learned a few Lakota words. From Paris we went into Germany, and from there to a place where the earth was burning. There was a tall butte, shaped at the top like a teepee, and it was burning up there. I heard that a long time ago a big town and many people disappeared in the earth there. I was more and more sick to go home all the time now, because it had been 2 winters since I went away. I could not think of anything else, and after a while this made me really sick, but I thought I would have to stay with the show until I could get money enough to go home. Mexican Joe took us back to Paris, but I could not be in the show because I was so sick now. The girl I told you about took me home to her father and mother, and they made me well. Then one morning I did go home for a while. That morning I had on Wasichu clothes and shoes and everything. The only difference was that my hair was long. It was not braided, just hanging back over my shoulders. I was feeling well, and we were just sitting down to eat the first meal. This girlfriend of mine was sitting by me, and her mother and father and 2 sisters were sitting down too. As we sat there, I looked up at the roof, and it seemed to be moving. The house was going around up at the top, and stretching upward as it went around. I could see that we were all rising fast with the whole house, and it was turning around as it rose. Then a cloud was coming down as we rose, and suddenly I was on it, and the other people in the house were falling back away from me. Then I was alone on this cloud, and it was going fast. I clung to it hard, because I was afraid I might fall off. Far down below I could see houses and towns and green land and streams, and it all looked flat. Then I was right over the big water. I was not afraid anymore, because by now I knew I was going home. It was dark, and then it was light again, and I could see a big town below me, and I knew it was the one where we first got on the big fireboat, and that I was in my own country again. I was very happy now. The cloud and I kept on going very fast, and I could see towns and streams and towns and green lands. Then I began to recognize the country below me. I saw the Missouri River. Then I saw far off the Black Hills in the center of the world where the spirits had taken me in my great vision. Then I was right over Pine Ridge, and the cloud stopped. I looked down and could not understand what I saw, because it seemed that nearly all of my people of the different bands were gathered together there in a big camp. I saw my father's and mother's teepee. They were outside, and she was cooking. I wanted to jump off the cloud and be with them, but I was afraid it would kill me. While I was looking down, my mother looked up, and I felt sure she saw me. But just then, the cloud started back, going very fast. I was very sad, but I could not get off. There were streams and green land and towns going backward very fast below me. Soon the cloud and I were going right over the very big town again. Then there was only water under me, and the night came without stars. And I was all alone in a black world, and I was crying. But after a while some light began to peep in far ahead of me. Then I saw earth beneath me, and towns and green land and houses all flying backwards. Soon the cloud stopped over a big town, and a house began coming up toward me, turning around and around as it came. When it touched the cloud, it caught me and began to drop down, turning around and around with me. It touched the ground, and as it touched, I heard the girl's voice, and then other voices of frightened people. Then I was lying on my back in bed, and the girl and her father and her mother and her 2 sisters and a doctor were looking at me in a queer way, as though they were frightened. The English talker came from the show, and he told me how it was. While I was sitting at breakfast, they said I had looked up and smiled, and then I had fallen like dead out of my chair. I had been dead 3 days, except that once in a while I would breathe just a little. Often they said they could not feel my heart at all. They were sure I would soon be really dead, and they were getting ready to buy my coffin. But if I had not come back to life that time, they would have given me a good coffin. But as it is, I think it will be only a box. I did not tell the people where I had been, because I knew they could not believe me. A few days after that, these people heard the Pahuska was in town again, so they took me to where he had his show, and he was glad to see me. He had all his people give me 3 cheers. Then he asked me if I wanted to be in the show or if I wanted to go home. I told him I was sick to go home, so he said he would fix that. He gave me a ticket and $90. Then he gave me a big dinner. Pahuska had a strong heart. After a while, a policeman came and told me to get my things. He took me on the iron road, and in the morning I was by the big water, and they put me on another big fireboat. We were on the water 8 days. I was sick part of the time, but I was not sad, because I was going home. When the fireboat was back at the big town in my own country again, I started right away on the iron road. It was early in the morning when we came to Rushville. There were no Lakotas there at all, but there was a covered wagon with mules starting out for Pine Ridge, so I rode in the wagon. When I got to Pine Ridge, everything was just as I had seen it from the cloud. All the Lakotas were there, as I had seen them, because that was the year of the treaty, 1889, when the Wasichus bought some more of our land, all that was between the Smoky Earth, the White, and Good River, the Cheyenne. I had been away nearly 3 years, and knew nothing about this foolish thing until then. My mother's teepee was right where I had seen it when I looked down from the cloud, and other people were camped exactly where I saw them. My parents were in great joy to see me, and my mother cried because she was so happy. I cried too. I was supposed to be a man now, but the tears came out anyway. My mother told me she had dreamed one night in her sleep that I had come back on a cloud, but could not stay, so I told her about my vision.